Hello everybody, and welcome to my presentation on strength training using weights in horses. My name's Annette Wilson. I'm a physiotherapist and I'm a rider biomechanics coach, and my business is applied posture riding. So what I'm going to be talking about today is strength training in horses using weight. I've done a lot of research on this topic. I've Googled weight training, I've Googled strength training, I've Googled core training, I've talked to equine vets, I've talked to equine physiotherapists, people in research in strength training, and it seems that there's very little information on strength training in horses using weights specifically. There's a lot of information on strength training but not using weights. There was a little bit of work done back in the 60s where they did put weights around the horse's fetlocks or tried to weight the shoes up, but there's really no data, and at present there's no research on this topic. So the work that I've been doing, I think, is the initiation of the concept of this. So what I've looked at in applying the strength training is based on physiotherapy research and certainly looking at equine biomechanics, because the horse strength training in the horse is completely different in the application, not the concept, to training a human. So there's nothing is proven. What I've got is only clinical evidence. So if there's anyone out there that is interested in this or sparked an interest that would like to go on and do some research, I think that would be very well received. Now, when we look at strength training, we look at the skeletal muscle. That's the muscle that is in all of our body muscles. Smooth muscle is that muscle that surrounds our organs, and certainly cardiac muscle is that muscle that is around our heart. So the concept of training or strength training in a muscle is that we load the muscle, and when we load it, we recruit more fibers. When we do repetitive work, we recruit more fibers. We do this in intervals, so it's called interval training, and this allows the muscle to build. Then we allow recovery time for the next session. So your rest time is as important as your loading time. Now you can see in these two pictures a little bit of an exaggeration, but we can build muscle to increase bulk, and once we've got more bulk, we certainly gain more strength. So who am I? I'm Annette Wilson. As I said, I'm based in Clare in South Australia, and my business is applied posture riding. My history in the equestrian world is an event rider. I am a retired rider, event rider, competition rider now, so I train horses. I'm a rider coach. I still work as a chronic pain management physiotherapist. I've done a lot of work in rider biomechanics, so I consider myself a rider biomechanics specialist. I've certainly done a lot of training in equine biomechanics, and I train all my horses, and I train any horse that I'm involved in correct biomechanics. I'm certainly experienced, and as I said, my business is applied posture riding. So I feel that I am educated and experienced, and certainly done the research in being able to present on this topic. So what am I going to talk about? Most people know what strength training is, or building up a strength means. So why do we need to strengthen our horse? I'm going to have a quick look at that. Why do we need a strong top line and a core in our horse? For most of us that's obvious, but it doesn't seem to be carried out. You know, we might think that we need that, but why do we not then do it? Quick look at how we strengthen a muscle, and in this case, why do we use a weight as opposed to other methods? A quick look at interval training and why it is important. What is a biomechanical movement pattern? And this is very important in the application of strength training. We look at loading the movement pattern, so I will discuss briefly what a movement pattern is, where to apply the weights. Now this is my concept. As I said, there's no research in this, so I'm certainly open to suggestions, ideas, concepts moving forward. And when to use weight training. Now, as I said, this is my idea, and I'll tell you in a little bit why I came up with this topic or this concept and how I applied it. So why do we need a strong horse? And why do we need a strong top line and a strong core? Well, a strong horse will perform better, and it will certainly be a safer animal to ride. It's pretty obvious actually, but still we see very many horses out there that are not very strong and they're competing at a high level. A strong horse will carry the rider more efficiently, and it will be biomechanically balanced. We all understand now the ratio of weight. A heavy rider requires a bigger, stronger, heavier horse to carry it. A strong horse will also move in correct self-carriage. And the reason I say that is because when we start to strengthen the horse naturally using weights, the correct self-carriage, as in the top line through here, builds up. Once this top line builds up, this underneath overactive muscles, particularly in the neck, and lack of muscle in the back, when we change that balance, the horse will come into a correct self-carriage. A strong horse is less likely to suffer injury. Everything happens, accidents happen, but a strong horse is much more resilient, and they certainly look healthier. So what is the top line? Again, we probably all know this, but just briefly, it includes the rump, the loin, or just behind the spine, the top line of the spine between the ribs and the sacrum, the back, the neck, and the underline of the horse. So the top line is the top area and the core is the bottom area. So the core is the group of muscles here under the belly, and the core in the human wraps around from the spine. It does the same in the horse. The anatomy is just a little bit different. We've got our obliques, we've got the transverse abdominis, but we've also got deep within the spine, and this is often forgotten both in human physiotherapy and certainly in equine rehab training, the multifidus muscle. The multifidus muscle is the deep muscle that controls the stability of the spine at each spinal level, and it's called multifidus because there are very many of them. So how do we strengthen a muscle? Well, weight training, physiotherapy, endurance training, athlete training, bodybuilding, all involve strengthening a muscle. So the muscle is connected to a bone via the tendon. It has two ends. When the muscle contracts, the two ends come together. The muscle will recruit many fibers as needed for the job. So if you're going to pick up a cup of coffee, you don't need very many fibers. If you're going to pick up a bucket of water, that's a heavier load, you're going to recruit more fibers. So when we load the muscle, the brain sends for help, or the brain sends help in the form of fibers. So if we go to lift something up and it is heavier, then the body will recruit more fibers. So if we do more over time with repetitive loading, the muscle fibers will increase in number and in size. Now it's important to remember or understand that the number increases over time, but the size of each fiber increases, and this is where we get bulk and this is where we get strength. Now in some cases bulk will improve more quicker than objectively measuring strength. There's no non-use leads to atrophy and weakness and instability, and we certainly all know that within our own human bodies. So when we strengthen a muscle, if you go to a physio or a gym, we might use machines, we use weights, we use a resistance band, you might do swimming, an exercise bike, a treadmill. But in humans it all involves doing sets and deliberate training. We can't do that in the horse. We can only move the horse in the movements that it's got, because your horse is not going to go to the gym and do a workout. So we can't use resistance bands, we can't use machines, and we can't isolate body parts. So we need to use the horse's natural movement patterns, and we need to use that in variable time frames and in intervals. Now this is really important to understand, in that the concept of the muscle strengthening the muscle and building the muscle is the same, but how we apply it to our horse is different. So why do we use a weight? Well, primarily to load the muscle. And we all know with strength training in horses, we use hills and pole work and fast work. This is all very good, but it doesn't actually load the muscle. It just does more with the muscle. So we can use a weight to apply the direction of the force, and the amount of the weight is controlled. Now, the direction of the force is always going to be gravity to the ground. It's not going to be like a resistance band where we tie at one end and we use a pulley on the other end. The amount is variable and it's recordable. Now, this is really important. If you're going to start doing weight training and put a weight on, we want to have a look at record the amount, whether it's 500 grams, a kilo. We want to be able to record it. We want to be able to see how the horse copes, and then we're going to be able to vary it and increase the increments. The horse isn't tied down in any way, and this is really important. You do not apply any weight and then try and force your horse into a round frame or side reins, or very dangerous practice if you're using weights, and certainly I don't recommend that. When we use the moving parts of the horse and we apply a weight, the work is what's called concentric and eccentric, and you can also do isometric work as well. So we can do these movement patterns, and these are physiotherapy terms, but basically what they mean is the muscle is shortening and lengthening and staying still. So that's a static movement as we load that movement up. And as I said before, we can then increase the size and the number of the muscle fibers required for the load of work that we're asking. So we can see visual changes. They come quite quickly, and you'll actually see the muscles working. So it's important to be able to see this so that you understand actually what you're doing. The visual changes will appear in about 4 weeks, and your functional changes are evident around 6 weeks. Now, in some horses, this is much quicker. It depends what your starting point is. The objective changes in strength and stability are functional. So if you've got a horse that's a little bit wobbly at a straight line, trippy, after you've done some strength training, these functional changes will start to appear. In other words, the horse will be stronger and step clearer and with more power. Now, when we've reached a target, we've got good performance, the maintenance is ongoing, and it's the same as in athletic training or any human training. So what is interval training? We train in intervals, and again, this is very important in weight training, because if you do too much, you're going to do harm. So we record the load, that's the weight. We record the time under load, so the time that you had the horse working with the load on, and we record the rest time. Now, these are all intervals, and what we do, we start with a small load, a short time frame with a rest period between the sessions. Now, the rest period is really important, because with this sort of training we can get micromuscle tears, and or lactic acid buildup, and we need time for that to recover. If you don't give it time, you can cause more harm than good. So we increase the weight per session. We can manage the time per session, and we can manage the rest times. Now, I've designed a program based on my knowledge in weight training, but certainly all of the interval training and the application of the weights, we can have a guideline, but we certainly need to individualize it to each horse. As the load increases, the session times decrease and the rest time increases. So we load the horse up, make him work really hard for a short session, and then we let him recover. The same applies in human training. We must allow these muscle fibers to recover and grow after we've loaded them. Interval training is used in eventing and racing for fitness training to build the cardiovascular system, and certainly very effective in building what's called the Krebs cycle and the cycle for preventing galloping without using oxygen. Very effective in the last 100 meters for a race. So we start with a template and we adapt it to each horse. Now, interval training is the key, is very important for this sort of weight training. So what's a biomechanical pattern? All the paces have their own biomechanical pattern. The gallop and the walk is a 4-beat, the trot is a 2-beat, and the canter is a 3-beat. So each of those is a natural movement pattern, and what we want is to strengthen the muscles in those movement patterns. Correct movement will incorporate the movements, many of the muscles in those movement patterns. Now, if the movement pattern isn't performed, then the weakest muscle will bring the pattern back to what it is, and then the starting point starts from that. So it doesn't really matter. Whatever the weakest point is the starting point. So as we load the pattern will improve. Using force or tie down will break that natural movement pattern, and it will cause muscle imbalances. Force may well cause harm. Now you can see up here the horse trotting through Cavaletti's. That's his trotting, that's his movement pattern. You can see some use of the head, extension of the head on neck, flexion of the neck on the body. We've got some flexion and elevation through the hind leg here, and you can just see the core muscle starting to come in there. So that is the natural movement pattern that we want to strengthen. The canter and then the ridden at the trot, and the one in here is also the same, looking at a ridden pole trot. So the movement patterns of the horse are extremely important. You can see the horse has a vast array of muscles in all sorts of directions. Now we don't want to just strengthen one of these muscles. We find that very difficult in the horse. We can do that in humans, but what we want in the horse is that this whole pattern strengthens. And like I said before, the weakest muscle is the dictator of the starting point. If you leave that muscle behind by trying to force, you're going to have a broken movement pattern, you're going to harm your horse, and ultimately you're not going to be successful. So the movement patterns of the horse and the moving parts of the horse are what we are targeting. So it is important to understand what the movement patterns are. So we load the movement patterns to build the strengths. In the horse, we load those moving parts with the natural moving parts. So I know I repeat myself here over and over, but it's really important that you understand this. So the moving parts, again, as I've stated, working concentric and eccentric, so the limbs will lift and then lower. All of the, this is my concept and my rules with this work. We use a power walk to recruit the fibers through a large range of movement. Now if we walk and we just dawdle and then we change that walk pattern to a decent power walk with a marching swinging of the arms, we certainly recruit more fibers. So when we're doing power walk with the horse loading the movement pattern up, loading the body part up with weights, we are using the natural power, the natural movement pattern of the horse to build. So we load the neck and the hindquarters only, and I'll explain that in a minute. You can do this work when you lead the horse. You can do it on the lunge, no trot or canter though, or you can ride the horse. As the horse strengthens, we can add in some heel work because that increases the movement against gravity, and again, when you understand what concentric and eccentric movement patterns are, heel work builds that. We can add in pole work with variable heights, the number of poles and the widths of the poles that the horse has to step over. You do not do fast work with weights applied. It is extremely dangerous. So where do we apply the weights? The research that I did, and I've done a few presentations to equine vets and equine physios, my concept and history of my education with the biomechanics is that I apply weight pads to the neck and weight boots to the hind legs. So I don't apply weight to the back, and I don't apply weight to the front legs. The front legs are more a landing, stabilizing weight-bearing surface. The neck is a moving pattern which the horse uses for strength and stability for the rest of its body, and certainly the hindquarters need to be strong to power the horse and to carry the horse from any forward movement. Now, when do we apply weight training? Well, you can actually do it to any horse, but the starting point is going to vary. So we can train all performance horses with weight training. It does require some extra time on the behalf of the rider or the strapper. Race horses certainly, and it's very easy to apply weight training to race horses because they're put on a walker and they're walked just round circles. Now, applying the weights as the horse is doing the walker, again, being diligent in putting them on and off in the appropriate timing, very easy to apply weight training to the racehorse. We can look at weight training returning after a spell, any horse that's had an injury, but you must work with a physio and or be referred by a vet when you're looking at rehab from injury in any horse. Recreational horses and certainly horses with kissing spine. Now, the reason I got into this is Cody. Cody was brought to me with kissing spine. He had bilateral suspensory ligament. He had grade 1 Wobbler's disease, and he had an unstable sacroiliac joint. And this is all diagnosed through a veterinary assessment with x-rays and ultrasound scans. It was recommended that he be put down. So his owner brought him to me, and we started a rehab program. So I did 6 weeks of the normal walk, build up, and increase a little bit of trot, the normal program, and I got Cody up, pretty strong, working, and then his owner said we're going to sell him. So we put him on the market, full disclosure of all the injuries. The day he went on the market, I had an injury off another horse and completely ruptured my hamstrings off my seat bones, and basically I couldn't move. So this horse had such an amazing temperament, I decided I'd buy him and put my money where my mouth was. So I bought Cody, and he and I were involved in our own joint weight training program. I looked at Cody and thought, well, he's actually strong, but he hasn't built up, and if he was human, what would I do with him? So I would weight train him as my patient, and that was the starting point for me to research, design, and come up with this program. Now, Cody became my test pilot, my test dummy, and the outcome couldn't have been better. He developed into the biggest, strongest, okay, a little bit fat, but he was a horse that couldn't stand square, couldn't walk down a hill, couldn't hold the bit, wobbled all over the place, staggered, to a horse that would gallop around the paddock, stand on his hind legs and play with the other horses, almost walking backwards on his hind legs to spin and gallop off again. Certainly an amazing recovery. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but it did happen. So Cody and I had our recovery together using weights. So that was where it all started. The other thing I used with Cody was what I call it a feeding station. Like I said, he wouldn't stand square, so I put his feed up high, and as you can see here, he's got natural self-carriage with his head on neck to move around to get his feed, but for him to stand in that posture, I haven't got it on the photo, but he had to stand in a square gait. Here he is cantering, and you can see he's not that well built up, and that was the starting point for the weight training. We'd done quite a lot of rehab, but not weight training. Here's Cody about 3 months into it. He was just a delightful horse. I just, so miss him. He was sold on. Here's Cody at a dressage day, competing at prelim and novice. That was his first day out, almost a year after I started with him. So he just had an amazing recovery. This horse is Casey. She was given to me as a nasty little mare. You couldn't do anything with her. She's got kissing spine, in a lot of pain. She also had a belly full of ulcers. So anyway, we figured out a lot of things, but basically she wasn't very strong, certainly not through the Topline. So she was started on a weight training program, and as you can see in this photo, the development of her muscles. Again, nothing happened overnight, but She just turned into the loveliest little mare. I still have her, and I give riding lessons from 14 to 73-year-olds on her. We are careful who we put on her weight-wise, and certainly the saddle has been fitted correctly, and we don't overwork her. But for a horse with kissing spine, she's having a wonderful life. Here's just an example to promote self-carriage. This is Sid. He is a quarter horse, certainly loved his feed, but even though the quarter horse bulk, he was not very strong. Bulk doesn't necessarily mean strength. So we did a whole weight training program with him, and again, the outcome was excellent. And you can see here the natural movement of the head and the neck to get his feed. The weight program that the weights that I applied, this is a neck weight pad. Certainly it took me a lot of dollars, a lot of templates, and a lot of throw things away and come back again. But basically what I came up with was a neck pad that we could put variable weights in, and the hind boots, which I'll show you in a minute, with the same concept. So this has got a rubber non-stick, non-slip surface. It's padded so that the bars don't rub against the skin. It is fixed with Velcro straps, and then I have put a couple of little ropes so that when the horse does put his head down and start to swing into that lovely walk, he doesn't get clobbered in the ears. The other thing that's really important is that the muscular stability or coverage of the first 3 vertebrae is very minimal. So you don't want to load up these joints. And again, understanding your anatomy and your physiology is important. Now, I make these weight pads. I haven't seen them anywhere else on the net, so we'll discuss that in a minute. So here are the hind boots. Again, they are padded. Sufficient padding. They've got pockets each side, so we start with small weights. I looked at every design of weight, and in the end I came up with steel bars cut deliberately to fit and weighed, and we've got a little gap there so that it fits around the back of the tendon of the hind leg. I've only had one horse that didn't agree with them. We start wrapping them around without any weights because they are on tight, and of course with a weight in them you can see that if you start having a horse really jerk them around, they can slip, but they're easy to get on and off. So they're secured with a Velcro strap, and you get your horse used to them by having no weight, and of course we build the weight up. Now with the hind weights there is a maximum because we can't just keep loading it and loading it. So weight training in horses, it's valid and it works, has the same concepts in humans. It's ideal for all horses. It's safe, it's effective, it's natural. We use it in rehab. Certainly excellent for performance horses, and those that are strong, you certainly understand can see the results in their performances. Very quick with its short-term results and the lasting results, long-term results, as long as you apply a little bit as a maintenance. Generally it's pain-free. And if your horse is getting pain, you need to reassess and certainly have some advice on what you're doing. The guidelines are good. Specificity is better. So what I mean by that, I've got guidelines for how you start, but we need to be very specific with each horse. So it's used in conjunction. I've designed an equine core belt. I've got a human core belt. So to activate a horse with a weak core, I actually incorporate my weight training with an equine core belt, but that's a different topic. There is a lot of research that needs to be done. Now, don't play around with this. Don't suddenly go out and get a weight and stick it around your horse's neck. There are starting points, there are positions which I can't go into today because it's just too extensive. I'm just introducing the concept of weight training in horses. So please be very careful with that. So the research I've researched and designed this all by myself and at Wilson. The concept seems to be instigated by me. The people I've spoken to are very excited about it, but at this stage there is no research. If you want more information, you can contact me. If you want to purchase any of these products and start your program, you can order through my website, but talk to me first. So, any questions? Now, I know that this has been brief with a lot of information, but not much explained. So, the concept of weight training in horses is new, but in my opinion, my experience, and my knowledge, it's very well worthwhile doing. The results are visible, functional, long-term, and can only do you and your horse a lot of good. So when we go to the live Q&A, certainly ask any questions. So thank you for your time.